So, the way this saw used to work is it had this big air-powered clamp that you would bolt down to the table. And that there is what it was. It had this big air cylinder, a couple springs to make it return, it had a little sensor on the back. Now, this thing was absolutely terrible. The only way to adjust it was with two bolts back there, and then it sort of clamped down onto a washer beneath the plate, and it would constantly slip backwards. It didn't hold tight, and you had to tighten those bolts so hard for it to not move. It also had no way to adjust angle, because this saw does in fact have an angle adjust on the back. It can go 45 degrees, that way you kind of swing it forward, remove those pins, and you can set it to whatever angle you'd like. But the clamp does not do that. I did have to cut some 45s at one point, and as you can see, there's a corner cut off of that back there. So that didn't work too great. There's not much room at all for that to not get hit by the blade and to still clamp onto stuff. I still like having the option of it being sort of automatic, so I put an air cylinder down in there, and that clamps onto the edge or to the end of that rod. So whenever the air cylinder actuates, it pulls the rod in an additional like 1 inch or 3/4 of an inch, which is just enough to clamp onto whatever is in between this and what you want to clamp. Now, this is in fact not what's going to actually touch what you're trying to hold. I'm going to make sort of a bar that goes across here with a bunch of holes machined into it. That way you can adjust the pivot point, so even if this is at an angle, you can still grab onto the stock where you want. I also redid the control panel on it. This was all sort of rusty and corroded, so took it off, cleaned it, painted it, did all that. I also added the VFD there, which is the speed control for the blade. Since I had no way to slow it down low enough to actually cut steel, it was going so fast I could only cut like aluminums and plastics with it. So that there now reads out the blade speed. Whenever it's on, you can read the surface speed of the blade. Alright, the final adjustment is this. This here is a sort of a force sensor that it uses to detect how much force is on the blade. So we have our normal roller guides here. These keep the blade square when it's cutting, and then there's another bearing up here that pushes the blade down into the work. And there's sort of a spring tension adjust up here that determines how hard the spring pushes the blade down. So as you're cutting, this will start and stop the feed. Now it doesn't start and stop it so much that the blade will actually disengage from the cut. It kind of just very lightly relieves the cut force a little bit, as to not force the blade down into a cut that's too wide for it to actually feed through quick enough. I already have it set to be lowering. If you have this all the way to the right, it just holds it in place, it won't lower at all. For steel, it's normally like 8. And as you can see, it is very slowly going down, and it will be making a cut if the blade was running and I had actual material in there. These controls over here are for the hydraulics. So I'm gonna raise it up. So if I set it to lower, have it go down, and then push up on this sensor. It's actually a bit hard to push up on. Alright, if it's lowering and you push up on this, you see that? It sort of locks in place if there's too much force on this, which allows the blade to sort of catch up in the cut before it gets bogged down too far and will jam. Alright, so now we can get back to actually making the piece that this video is about. The way I plan on making this is have our 2 bars, and these will have holes bored this direction straight through both of them. There'll be like 8 of them or something. And then at the front will be welded 2 bars of steel, like 1-inch round bars. So we're gonna go throw these in the milling machine, and then we'll get all of our holes bored in them, get the corner sort of notches taken out, and then we'll add the sort of chamfers onto them. And there we go. They're both done. Next up is going to be making these bars that will connect both of these plates and will be welded in place. Alright, so here it is. I just made these metal bars that go on each corner and welded it all up. So hopefully this nicely slides onto that pin that's already on the saw. And the moment of truth. And there we go. And then move the fence upward to that.